All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Afzal Sheikh, pre-sales for CrowdStrike from Redington Value. So today we'll be talking about remote remediation using CrowdStrike, which is an EDR. So to begin with, I would be introducing you to the CrowdStrike as a platform, and from there we'll be moving on to the remote remediation when it comes to CrowdStrike. Okay, so So basically, CrowdStrike is a cloud delivered solution which mainly focuses on taking proactive decisions on the malware, right? So when I say cloud delivered solutions, there is a fine difference between a solution being cloud delivered and a cloud based solution. Okay, so when it comes to cloud based solutions, what happens is that, let's say that any attack is going on. So generally the whole packet itself that might or might not include data is being sent to the cloud for analysis purpose. All right. And when it comes to cloud delivered solutions, they don't really send the entire data packet to the cloud for analysis, rather only that specific indicator of attack, or you could say the metadata would be sent to cloud for analysis purpose, right? So then if we look at the breach proliferation which generally occurs, we can see that there are three main factors which kind of influences the whole part, right? The first part being attack sophistication. We know that the attacks are getting sophisticated day by day, as we see that earlier we used to have normal worms, right, which had the capability to like propagate from one network to another, because that has that capability to cause the lateral movement, right? So but we can see that when an encryption routine is basically piggybacking behind a worm, it becomes a ransomware, right? And with the evolution of time, we also saw a couple of attacks such as botnets, for which nowadays we have a dedicated solution such as that of BotSync, etc., right? And then the problem is if you have a lot of solutions out there, right, to address, let's say, ransomware, you have a dedicated solution. To address a virus, you have a dedicated antivirus, right? And then to address some adwares and all, you have separate module working for it. To address DLP, you have a separate module for it, right? So we know that in the end, to tackle all these different kinds of attacks which are considered to be highly sophisticated, you need to have a product sprawl, different products addressing different concerns, right? So this leads to outmoded defense, because when you have a huge product sprawl, what happens in the end is that you leave the loopholes behind, and when you leave the loopholes behind, that's the perfect time for any sort of attacker to get inside your network, right? And since you have a product sprawl, and then the attack is getting sophisticated, etc., in the end your whole solution, or the setup, or you could say the threat prevention setup in general, it becomes highly complex, and that clearly indicates that it is highly difficult to administer a solutions, or which administer to different solutions which have different capabilities, right? So what we need at this time is an idealistic solution, right, which can do all of the things in one single console, and which is easy to manage, which is not really contributing to your local system performance, right? So so the main key to stopping all the breaches is to have the right endpoint protection in place, right? And then mainly the endpoint protection in place would just block any sort of attack which is directed towards your organization, or it could be directed towards your endpoint, right? And when it comes to threat intelligence part of it, the second factor, or you could say the second key to stopping breaches, is to have right threat intelligence platform in place. The purpose of having right threat intelligence platform in place is to make sure that you're ready to face the next set of attacks, or you could say that ready to counter the future attacks, right? Then you need to have a managed hunting team, right, who are able to tackle zero-day attacks. For example, let's say that there is a attack which is new, which is like the concept itself is new, like how ransomware was kind of new back in 2015s and 16s, right? So we need to have a solution that has the capability to offer protection for zero-day attacks as well, and which might also include the user interference, right? For example, we need to have a team which can monitor your network all the time, looking for any sort of attack which has the potential to bypass your main EDR solution. And finally, you need to have incident response and a couple of proactive services, right? And then When it comes to CrowdStrike, right, it's a single layered architecture. Okay, when I say single layered architecture, it means that you don't require multiple agents to be doing different jobs. It's one single agent which does everything for you, which is lightweight 25 MB agent, and then it's a huge database of the behavioral patterns, right? And then approximately 96 billion events are received onto the CrowdStrike cloud, which is used across 176 different countries, right? So the main key about CrowdStrike is that it does not use the concept of agents at all. So it uses the concept of sensing. So the main difference between agent and a sensor is that agent totally relies on the scanning mechanism, right? So as in, what it would do is that it would send probe packets to each and every service, each and every file system, eventually making the whole system's performance to be impacted, right? So sensing, what it does is that it focuses only on one single phase, that is the execution phase, right? So let's say an attack is being executed or any sort of a virus is being executed. So at that point of time, it's going to act on it and it's going to have it blocked for you. So it's not really going to scan or send any probe packets. And this whole approach curbs down the performance to from, you could say, the delta value would be 50%, right? So moving forward, in the end, it's able to provide you better protection, better performance, better value, right? And then if you look at the Gartner report of 2019, you'll find CrowdStrike to be in the leaders quadrant, right? And even in other like market research organizations such as that of Forrester, you'll always find CrowdStrike to be in the leaders quadrant, right? And if we talk about the ecosystem of CrowdStrike is called as Falcon. Falcon is the main platform of CrowdStrike, which is divided into three important modules. One is endpoint security, and the main function of endpoint security is to detect and prevent the current or ongoing attacks proactively. And the second important component is security operations. This is to make sure that your IT infrastructure is hygienic enough to make sure that your vulnerability is, or you could say that your attack surface is very less, right? And the third one is threat intelligence. This is to make sure that you're prepared for future set of attacks, right? And when it comes to endpoint security, it is further branched into three more modules. One is next generation antivirus, EDR, and device control. So if we talk about the next generation antivirus, what it does is that it does not, unlike the other systems, other EDR solutions, it does not depend on signature-based detection. The reason why it does not depend on signature-based detection is because the signature-based detection generally consumes a lot of bandwidth. It increases the latency on your network. It puts a lot of load on your system. Because what you're doing is that, let's say that a packet gets inside your endpoint, what you're trying to do is that you decode the packet, right? And then there is a huge database of signatures that most of the traditional products use, and then it takes the SHA value or any hexadecimal value and compares it against the database, the huge database of signatures one by one, right? And passing through such huge database takes a lot of time, and then there is a wait period, and then there is a little bit of latency involved, right? And then eventually it will also increase the performance, or it will impact your performance of the system itself, right? So signature-based detection concept is kind of obsolete. So the modern concept is to have right artificial intelligence, or you could say behavior analytics system in your as a part of your antivirus. So CrowdStrike depends only on behavior analytics engine, which uses a combination of artificial intelligence, which is on cloud, or you could say cloud delivered, and then machine learning, which operates on your endpoint layer, right? So when it comes to behavior analytics, what happens is that it detects on the basis of IOAs, indicators of attacks, right? So what happens is that we can take an example of a ransomware. So what happens in the case of ransomware is that if now the legitimate situation would be, let's say that encryption routine is being invoked on the end system, right? And your Microsoft cryptographic service is running, right? So if this is the case, it would be considered as legitimate because your Microsoft cryptographic service is the one which is invoking the encryption routine, right? Whereas let's say that the Microsoft cryptographic service is not running and your encryption routine is being invoked, that's a clear-cut indication that there resides an application inside your endpoint which is capable of invoking this encryption routine, which is not very legitimate, I would say. Well, there are exceptions, but it's something that drags our concern. So all these bug marks, or you could say indicators, are recorded and then they are sent to artificial intelligence engine of CrowdStrike called as threat graph for the analysis purpose. Eventually, post the analysis, the verdict is given by threat graph, right, to the end system whether or not this should be blocked. Now, machine learning would be used. Now, here the reason why machine learning is being used is because we cannot be sending all the indicators to the Cloudflare analysis. The reason is because that will contribute to a lot of your bandwidth. So what it does is that using the machine learning, it would be able to pick and choose which IOA, which can be considered as a suspected IOA and needs to be inspected furthermore, right? So in the end, it's an AI and ML system which is running in parallelly, right? Next, let's say that there is a detection being made. So in that case, your EDR becomes active, and then you'll be able to investigate it by looking into the logs and by looking into process timelines, and you can investigate attacks in depth using the EDR component of CrowdStrike. Right? So any sort of investigation is being done by EDR component. And thirdly, it comes with the device control. And using the device control capability, what you could do is that you can block the USB. You can set up a USB policy or a device policy for your infrastructure. For example, let's say that you don't want any USB to be allowed except for this one single vendor that is whitelisted, right? So you can define a policy saying that, okay, block all the vendors or block all the USB types, just allow, for example, SanDisk. Right? So this is what you can achieve using device control. Well, you can achieve most of the complex use cases such as allowing only projector of type A to the infrastructure. Rest everything should be blocked. So well, policies such as that can also be set up. Right? Moving on to the security operations part of it, you have three main modules inside it. One is threat hunting, also called as Falcon Overwatch, and then IT hygiene and vulnerability management. So using in threat hunting, what happens is that, right? So let's say that there is this malware, right, which next generation antivirus could not, detect. So in that case, it would of course be sent to the sandbox for analysis purpose. But let's say that even it managed to evade even the sandbox. So in that case, what managed threat hunting team would do is that it is going to check if there is if there exists a packet or exists any sort of attack which has the potential to bypass CrowdStrike, or it could be any sort of a zero-day attack which has the potential to bypass CrowdStrike, right? So in that case, the managed threat hunting team, they'll block it for you, and then they'll notify you via email saying that, okay, we have blocked a specific attack for you. Okay. So then there is this IT hygiene component. So what it does is that it's going to list out all the applications which are running inside your infrastructure, okay, and it will show you which hosts are using those applications. Along with, it will also show you what kind of assets are running, which are the managed assets, unmanaged assets, and unsupported assets. Managed assets as in the ones, the assets in which the CrowdStrike agent or CrowdStrike sensor is being installed, and unmanaged as in which the CrowdStrike sensor is not being installed. And thirdly, unsupported as in your printer, scanner, CCTV, the ones in which you cannot install a CrowdStrike sensor at all. Right? So most of the time we come across a question saying that, okay, how exactly do you get to know if there exists an asset which is not managed, right? So in that case, what CrowdStrike does is that let's assume that there is a switch behind which there are 5 endpoints, right? In 3 of them you have a CrowdStrike sensor installed, and in 2 of them you don't have it installed. So all the time these 4 will be interacting with each other using the RPR packets which are exchanged. So with this, those 3 endpoints in which CrowdStrike is being installed would get to know about the presence of other 2 endpoints, right? So what CrowdStrike does is that it's going to check that, okay, there exist 5 endpoints behind this subnet or in this particular subnet, right? In which in 3 of them we have the agents installed. So it would say that, okay, these 2 are the assets which are not managed. Right? So then you have the third module, which is vulnerability management module. So what it does is that, let's say that there is this host, let's say 10.1.1.1, right? So what it does is that it's going to check that this particular host, how many applications are being installed inside this host, right? Let's say that, let's consider one such example. Let's say that Adobe is present inside one of the systems. So what it does is that it's going to check that, okay, which version of Adobe is being used. Let's say Adobe 10. So what it does is that it checks whether the system is, or let's say that the Adobe application is patched to the latest update which is being released by vendor, right? Let's say that there is this patch missing. It is going to tell you that, okay, this patch was missing from your system, and since this patch is missing from your application, you might be exposed to this sort of attacks. Let's say remote code execution, or it could be buffer overflow, etc. So this is how it does vulnerability management. In a nutshell, it does vulnerability management on the basis of patching. Whether your applications are patched, whether your OS is patched, it's going to do vulnerability management on the basis of that. Right? Then comes the threat intelligence module. So the whole concept of having the threat intelligence module is to make sure that you're prepared for next set of attacks. Right? So it gives you a interactable GUI, or you could say a very interactable pane, in which what you can do is you can filter out saying that, okay, my target country is UAE, and then I work for a government sector, and then inside that government sector, what kind of attacks are being common, right? And those, and it would be listing out the CV IDs which are commonly exploited, and it will tell you that whether your systems are actually vulnerable to this CV ID, right? It will be able to tell you that using the threat intelligence module. So this works on the basis of feeds. Right? Then you have the mal query component, which is the huge database of malwares, which you can just automate the flow here by you need to activate real-time response. And once you activate that, what happens is that the moment a packet gets inside, it would be taken to the mal query. It will be checked if this packet was found inside the malware encyclopedia. And if there is a packet found inside, if it is found to be malicious inside the malware encyclopedia or mal query component, what it does is that it would increase the confidence level of the attack. And once the confidence level of the attack is increased, you can always take actions on them, right? And finally, you have the sandbox component, in which, automatically, if you turn on the RTR, real-time response feature, it would take the packet to the sandbox component for the further analysis purpose. It would be able to tell you whether this is malicious or not on the basis of sandboxing. Right? And then moving on to the real-time response feature that CrowdStrike has to offer. So generally what we do is that we define the administrators first, which are capable of taking the real-time response or remote remediation, right? So for example, this one, we check the roles over here. We put in the basic information such as your email address, your first name, last name, etc. And then there are these three real-time responder roles, right? One is, if you click on this, if you just hover over this exclamatory mark, you'll be able to just see what kind of commands are allowed for this particular role. And you can see that all the read commands are allowed, but you don't really have the privilege to execute or kill any process. You cannot execute any script remotely to do the incident response, and neither would you be able to kill any process. So you'll not be able to perform any write action. Secondly, with the administrator, you have access to everything. You can just upload the scripts remotely to do the incident response. You will be having the ability to kill the process. You'll be able to view the registry modifications being made, right? All the history of commands that have been executed, right? All those events can be seen. So these are a couple of commands which you can execute remotely to perform your incident response, right? And then you have the active responder, in which the only thing that you cannot do is that you'll not be able to put in a new script or put in a new file. Okay. So, you'll still be able to run the script which is present on the remote endpoint, but you will not be able to upload anything from your system onto the end system for the remote response and remediation. Right? So, first we define the roles. Right? If you would want it to be a read-only analyst or responder or administrator. After you define that, or once you are done defining it, you go to the hosts pane, right? Let's say that the attack has already taken place. So what I would do is that I would go to detections pane, right? Here you can see that there are a couple of attacks which have been listed out, right? So what you can do is that, and then you can also see that the kind of severity which is associated with it. Most of the time, just for information, most of the time we use remote response feature when it comes to any sort of a medium, high, or critical attacks. Okay, so so let's say that a ransomware attack has taken place, or any sort of a severe worm has been lurking around your network. So what you need to do in that case is, the first thing is you need to network contain it. So when you click on network contain, what it does is that it's going to chop off all the layer 2 and layer 3 channels, right? So you'll not be allowed to browse internet, or you'll not be able to interact with the immediate systems or immediate endpoints. So your whole system will be contained, and then you can, after you remote contain it, you will be able to connect to the host remotely, right? Once you click on network contain, all the network channels get blocked. For example, example could be, let's say, as a part of ransomware remediation, what we generally do is we isolate the system. So you don't really have to plug out the cables and all that. You can just click on network containment, and once you click on containment, the whole machine will be contained, and then you can connect to the host remotely, and then you can execute the commands which you would want to do, right? For example, let's say that you would want to see child items running, so you can just run this script over here. Yeah, like this. So these are the child items which are present inside this component. You can see here. So these are the child components which are present, or you could say what is present inside that particular directory. You will be able to see that, right? So apart from that, you can execute a couple of commands. First, you can type in help to refer to the commands which you have been allowed to use, right? So you can remotely, you can see here, you can check the remote processes. For example, list out the processes over here, and it would list out all the processes which are running in the background, right? So you can see there is a process ID associated with it, and you found, let's say that you find that at the time of attack, there was this encryption routine which was running a lot of times. So what you could do is you can kill that process remotely, and then you can slowly start to revert it, right? For example, let's say services, and then there's this process ID which we can see. So all you have to do is you can just kill it remotely. For example, kill. So generally, there's no, or maybe the process ID is changing. So generally, you can kill the process remotely using the kill command, right? You can kill the process remotely, and then you can just list out the contents of that specific path if you want to see if there is something inside that path, right? So apart from that, you can take a memory dump, or you could say you can dump the whole kernel memory using the xmem dump over here. And then let's say that there is this script you would want to upload. You can use the put command, and you can put in the path of the script where it is present, and then you can run the script using the run component, run script, right? This component you can use, this command you can use, and then you can execute any PowerShell script, right? And let's say that you would want to execute any executable. All you need to do is you can just type in run, and you can execute any executable inside that particular endpoint to remotely address that, right? So you can use, and then to view the history of commands, you can just type in history, type it. You can see all the commands which had been executed in the past, right? So all those details you can find it over here. right? And then apart from that, you can set up, you can go to the hosts pane. And of course, you can upload any sort of a PowerShell script. You can customize it. You can upload it to the endpoint, and you can have it executed remotely as well. So that comes as a capability, as a part of one of the capabilities of a remote responder, right? So you can see there are a couple of endpoints which are present, online hosts which are present. Let's say there is this one of the host which is present. So you can connect the host right from here as well, and then you can get the basic information right from here. It says what kind of, if it's a domain join system, if it's a workstation, etc. Which policy is being applied, right? Let's say that there was this specific virus which has gotten inside, so you can always look into your virus policy, which is your prevention policy. You can just click on platform default. It will take you to the specific policy where and then you can just fine tune the policy if required. For example, you can see that script based monitoring is not active, so you can turn it on, right? So you can always track the policies which are missing, and then you can harden your systems all the time, right? So this is how we use the remote remediation capability. So apart from that, of course, you can set up the policy saying that what kind of action you would like to take, right? Would you like to quarantine, let's say, would you like to quarantine a machine if quarantine a particular file if it is found to be malicious? So you can always have that done, right? So these are some of the remote remediation techniques which you can use. So in nutshell, you can execute, you can network contain endpoint, you can run customized scripts and customized commands based on the kind of the role that you select for a particular user. Apart from that, you can define a policy saying that, okay, would you like to quarantine a file if it's found to be malicious, right? And then you can define a containment policy, you can define prevention hashes, etc. Right? Of course, you have the capability to customize your response scripts as well. Right? So that's how you generally do the remote remediation. So you can ask me question now if you have any. So if you have any questions, you can always get in touch with us, and then you can let us know. Right? So with this, let's just close this. Thank you very much for joining us. Have a great day.